Welcome back to the channel. This is the action figure grader, and Hakes completed the Star Wars portion of their November premiere auction last night. I'm filming this. I think I'll release it Saturday. And there were some absolutely stunning items in this auction lot. It's just hit after hit after hit coming over at Hakes. They just seem to have an endless supply of just incredible items that have sold. And I don't think there were any major surprises in this auction. I mean, there were some very rare items, some very high grade items. So those prices obviously reflected that. There was a beautiful AFA 85 plus vinyl cape Jawa that kind of came in below my expectations. A double telescoping saber Luke, a first shot prototype Luke Stormtrooper, some very, very high-end items that you don't see that often. And I wanted to just go ahead and dig in. I picked a random assortment of items that caught my eye. It was by no means is this going to be a complete rundown. There were over 200 items in this auction, so going through everything would be really tough. But I just picked out everything that kind of struck my eye. And the first one that came in, I think for a lot of the high-grade, typically expensive items, it seemed like a lot of those items came in below expectations or at the lower end of the value code versus stuff that you don't see that often that was high grade or rare. Those tended to blow out the auction estimates. So this is the early bird mail away kit with the double telescoping saber Luke Farm Boy baggie, AFA 80. So not the highest grade, but still a pretty darn high grade. It's a near mint grade. 80, 85, 85 were the subscores. So 285 subscores, the double telescoping saber Luke baggie, I would have guessed in that 13 to 15 range at a minimum. And it came in at 11,800. So it was towards the lower end of the value code of $10,000 to $20,000. But still, I think that's a very good deal. A very good deal for somebody there. Here, this is another one that I expected to go a little bit higher. They had the value code at 10 to 20,000, and this is an AFA 80 plus double telescoping saber Darth Vader. That's tough to find. That, Ben Kenobi with the double telescoping saber is clearly the toughest. Darth Vader is right behind it, and while not impossible, it is a very high grade, an 80 plus grade, which is not easy to find. Typically, it feels like anyway, that typically when you see the double telescoping saber Vaders, at least lately on the big auction houses, they're either no grade or they're kind of like 70, 75 grade. So this was an 80 plus, and it came in at a final sales price of $98.64, which I'm really surprised it didn't at least cross 10,000. 10, 11,000 would have been my guess on that. But that's one that maybe, it seems like all the other examples that have sold recently, that it's come down just a little bit. It's still always going to be a very expensive item, but it does seem like it's kind of taken a slight step down in terms of valuations for the ones that have shown up at auction. But that was a nice figure. I thought that was a very fair deal. This was probably my biggest surprise from the auction, I guess. I don't know, just going on memory. But this was an 85 plus grade vinyl cape Jawa. I didn't really, it says in the auction description, does not exhibit any discoloration. I mean, you could make an argument if you're being super picky that it's got a little spot here and there of discoloration on the collar and then, towards the middle of the cape. But that's being extremely picky. But, you could say that there is some spots there if you wanted to be super picky about it. The subscores on this one were 85, 90, 90. Is that vinyl cape Jawa really a 90 with those spots on there? I personally don't think so, and I'm guessing that that's why the market reacted the way it did. It was also punched, which if you're a super discerning collector and you're going to be dropping 5 figures on a mint on card, maybe you just be patient and wait for one that's unpunched and it looks about as perfect as you can be. So that's what those are the kind of things I'm striking this final sales price up to, is that, it's all guesswork, right? As to why certain things sell for maybe lower than my expectations. But this value code of 20 to 35, I thought was right on the money, assuming that it was perfect, right? But it came in at 27.68. So, it's probably a disappointing sales price for the seller, but there are some reasons why, I think. Just, and part of it could be the timing is just wrong. We just had one that sold in the last auction, or maybe 2 auctions ago, over at Hakes, that was arguably a better example. And, well, it's definitely a better example. I think it was an AFA 90. So those kind of things and all. There's only so many people that want to drop $20,000 or $25,000 on a mint on card action figure. So maybe the timing wasn't perfect, but probably could have waited. I don't know. It's all guesswork as to how things are going to end up at auction. And that's the risk you take, right? Probably could have gotten a better price maybe in a different environment. That's where I'm going with it. So anyway, it was a very, very nice example and a good deal, I think, for the buyer on that one. Another Cantina Adventure set, the Sears exclusive with the blue snaggletooth baggie along with the other Cantina patrons. This was an AFA 80 near mint example, and that one came in below the expectations of 10 to 20,000. That came in at 97.63. Gosh, we just saw one that sold fairly recently, sometime this year, that was over 20,000. So that number came in maybe a little lower than expectations, but I would argue that this number is probably closer to reality, right? Relative to some of the other ones that we've seen come up that sold. This was a big price. This one came in well above expectations, and I understand why. I mean, this was a beautiful transition ESB 21 back Princess Leia, graded AFA 85, straight 85 subscores, unpunched, beautiful clear blister. So this was an absolute stunner. None higher on the population report. I'm sure there's maybe some other AFA 85 examples, though. The value code was 1 to 2, and I'm like, when I saw that, I was like, there's no way that's going to sell for that low. And sure enough, it did go for $3,500, which still even went above my expectations. I was thinking $2,500, maybe on the outside, $3,000, but somebody paid up a little bit for it, and I don't blame you. This is one where dropping $3,500 to me is a no-brainer. I mean, this is an awesome example, and we've got an even better one coming up on the 9 48 back for Princess Leia. But this one really was a beautiful figure, and believe me, $3,500. I do not fault anybody for spending that much, because that is really a truly a stunning example. Next up was the Hoth Snowtrooper. This one also surprised me a little bit on the upper end. It was a beautiful unpunched example, AFA 80. Value code of 700 to 1,000. It came in at 1590, which maybe I'm not that surprised, given that this is the debut card for the Hoth Snowtrooper. There's just limitless demand for this particular card back. The 31A Hoth Snowtrooper is just one of those items that if you're a big ESB fan, you're going to want this one. And so not a huge surprise for that sales price, but that was a beauty. Here was another one that's tough to find, and the price reflected it. I'm actually a little surprised this one didn't even go higher, but this was the 47 back C-3PO removable limbs, and this one was an 85, 90, 85. This is a very tough one to find. It's not the toughest obviously is I think the 45 back. That one there's only a couple of examples out there, but this was a beautiful clear blister 47 back. And kind of like we talked about with Forlom, this is the kind of the poor man's debut card. So 3,041 on that one. So that one blew away expectations as well. All right, now here's one that I want to talk more about. This is the mail-away Bossk AFA 85, the single highest graded example. And it's encased and graded, still sealed. Now, I've seen Chris over at Rogue 5 Toys has sold lower graded examples of the Bossk mail-away for over double, if not triple, this final sales price of $850. This, to me, you can do what you want with it, but to me, I think you should really, whoever bought this should really take this, send it back into AFA and say, I want to open it up and grade it uncirculated designation. And yes, you run the risk that it's got the early mail-away Bosks in these baggies. It used a specific type of plastic that typically does discolor. So you do run the risk that if you send it back in to AFA, they open it up, they grade it all displayed out, which those command easily, if it holds the 85 grade and it's still the single highest graded example, then you're going to double, if not triple, if not quadruple your money on it. If it holds the 85 grade. Now, like I said, though, the plastic used for those early Bosks, the arms and the legs, the plastic degrades and it kind of lightens the yellow portion of the figure lightens. So you do run the risk that AFA opens it up, the plastic is degraded, and then they give it an overall 80 instead. So that is the risk. But I think at $850 for a one of one, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to open it up, get it all graded so you can see everything instead of just a white box inside of a clear box. But that was a steal at $850. And I know that if I had personally bought this, that's exactly what I'd do. I'd send it back into AFA, include a note in the special instructions saying, I want to uncirculated grade this Bossk mail away so I can see everything inside. And so there is a risk that it doesn't get the 85, but man, that is a steal at $850 because, I mean, Chris over at Rogue 5, he sold like 75 grades for over double this price, over double easily. So that was a steal of a deal. On the other end of the spectrum, scratching my head a little bit, I mean, we've seen a number of Hoth Wampas. This is just the standard Hoth Wampa, nothing special about it. But this is an AFA 85, but we've seen 85s for the Hoth Wampa on eBay, and they've gone kind of $1,200 to $1,500, which is what the value code was on this one, 1,000 to 2,000. The winning bid was $43.12. So I don't know why this one in particular went so high, but all it takes is two to tango, and that one really left me scratching my head as to why it sold for so much. But anyway, that's a surprise. The Falcon on the other end of the spectrum, this Falcon sold for a lot less than I would have expected. This is an AFA 80 Empire Strikes Back packaging for the Falcon, and it's one of only 5 graded AFA 80 with just 1 graded higher. So you're getting 1 of 5 with only 1 graded higher, and it came in well below the value code of 5 to 10 at $3,900. So that to me was a bargain. Again, it could be a space issue. There's not a lot of people that want to have this. I mean, this is a gigantic item, and just guessing, I don't know, but really surprised that one sold for as cheap as it did at $3,900. Here was the box flat for the Snow Speeder, the blue background, AFA 80 Plus. That one sold for $31.86. Pre-production box flats. You know, there is a market for those. A lot of people collect those. Here was that life-size Sideshow Collectibles Han Solo in carbonite. The item that I said would cause an immediate divorce in the AFG household. And that one came in below expectations at $34.51. The value code was 5 to 10,000. You got to have room for it, though. But that was a really cool item that came in well below expectations. Here is the one that I alluded to earlier. Now, it was a punched example, but this was an AFA 85 48 back Return of the Jedi Leia, Princess Leia, and it had a Han Solo blaster packed inside. And they put the value code, it was kind of a guess, at 1,000 to 5,000. That's a pretty big range, but I would have guessed 2,500, maybe $3,000. And that one came in at $34.81. Maybe I'm not terrible. I mean, it was an AFA 85, so I shouldn't be too surprised. It also did have a blaster air packed inside. Only 8 examples in total have been graded by AFA. And this is the single highest graded example. So $34.81 for a tough-to-find Princess Leia with still a clear blister. This is probably your only really good shot at getting a Return of the Jedi Leia with a clear blister, because I think she really shows up on the 77 backs after that. Maybe a few 65 backs, but really heavy numbers for the 77 back, and they're almost always yellowed blister. So pretty decent deal, I guess. I mean, it's fair market, I guess. Here was an 85 grade Luke Gunner card for the 77 back, and this was $31.15. That one really surprised me on the upper end. I mean, you know, typically 2,000, 2,500, given the yellowing to the blister, heavy yellowing to the blister. So that was a number that was maybe a little more, not too much more, but a little bit more than I expected. Here was the light blue painted helmet Taiwan Boba Fett mint on card. Only an AFA 70, but it was the painted helmet Taiwan Fett, so you're going to get a premium for that one. And that one did sell at $34.39. Beautiful there. Here was a department store 8-pack of villains. This was a nice 8-pack. Pretty wide assortment here, but it included Boba Fett, the Hoth Snowtrooper, Stormtrooper, Biker Scout, some pretty big hitters here that you don't typically see in Return of the Jedi multi-packs. Typically, it's all Return of the Jedi characters like the Empire's Royal Guard or Nikto or Weequay, you know, things like that. But this had a mix of, you know, even a first 12 figure with the Stormtrooper, a first 21 figure with Boba Fett, and then you had, you know, some other ESBs and some other Return of the Jedi. So it's a nice assortment there. That one was an AFA 75 plus and sold for $14.29. Another one that kind of left me scratching my head was this collector series Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. That one, I mean, even the low end of the value code, I would argue, is probably a little high. But this one, let's see. There's 9 examples graded AFA 85 with just one higher. So it's not like super rare. And it's also the later collector series version of the TIE Advanced. So that one came in at $38.94, which left me gulp. That seems a little high to me for the collector series. Next up was the Return of the Jedi AT-AT. This was a beautiful AFA 85, none higher on the population report, 8 examples. So there's actually 8 of these graded AFA 85. That one came in at $47.20, or towards the upper end of the value code. That was a beautiful example, though. Look how crisp and clean this was. I mean, it had some very light scuffs to it, but give me a break. This is, look at that. That is in stunning condition for the AT-AT. So that one, you know, rightly so, I think, came in towards the upper end of the value code. What else do we have here? We got some pretty big items towards the end. We've got the Australia, New Zealand exclusive Gamorrean Guard on the Power of the Force card. This is a tough to find item that really only came out over in Australia and New Zealand, to my knowledge. And that one was graded AFA 80. The value code was 2 to 5. It came in at $55.68. So heavy bidding on that one. Same with the AT-AT driver. This is the Australia exclusive with the Warwick coin packed in. Pretty well-known variant. That one came in at $51.92, or towards the lower end of the value code. It was an AFA 75 plus, though, so I think that number is appropriate for the grade. Here was that beautiful first shot prototype Luke Stormtrooper disguise. The value code was 10 to 20. And it came in at $33,748. It was only an AFA 75, but it's the only AFA graded example of this prototype. So an absolutely amazing item. Hakes did a YouTube video. You can go look it up yourself. I don't want to play it because of copyright violations, but here it is right here. This was graded in 2024. First shot Luke Stormtrooper, light brown hair, and a prototype helmet. So that was an absolutely awesome item. And it's amazing that it's the first one graded by AFA, and it didn't get graded until 2024. So, you know, it just took that long for something like this to get graded. Here's a Kim Simmons photo of the actual item with the light brown hair. You can see very clearly it's got light brown hair. And the reason it got the 75 grade is because of the scuffing to the hair, to the forehead there. So, wow, what an awesome item. And it blew away expectations at $33,748. I don't know if it's because that auction was going on at the same time that this one sold for so high. You know, this was a CAS 85 for the Luke Stormtrooper, and it was also a punched example. And, you know, you could argue that maybe there's some frosting going on the head there. It's hard to tell. It doesn't look like it, but it does say, okay, age frosting to head. So it had age frosting. It was a punched example, CAS 85, and it came in at 1947, which to me feels like a big number. That's a huge number. So I think personally that this one, people maybe just got caught up and wanted to get a Luke Stormtrooper after this one was going on. I don't know, but it's just that number feels a little high to me as well. Here was that beautiful Vlix and it was only an AFA 50, but it was mint on card. It did have the blister support, and that one sold for $11,693, which is towards the lower end of the value code. Only 13 AFA graded examples, but this is probably one of the rarest production items that you can get. And I guess a lot of people maybe don't care about it, but because it was only down in, you know, the Brazilian glass sleeve factory. But to me, there's something really incredible about this particular mint on card that made me a little surprised that that one sold for as low as it did at 11,000 and change. And then finally, we had a Power of the Force Security Scout Body Rig proof card, AFA 80. First time I've ever seen one, and it is the only AFA graded example. It's got the rounded corners, which is a little different than the straight corners for the production item. And that one came in at $7,242, which is way above the value code of $1,000 to $2,000. So there is some demand for these very rare pre-production proof cards when they just don't exist. I mean, this is probably this is the first time I've ever seen any of these Power of the Force mini rigs with, you know, on these card backs. It's the first time I've ever seen one of these proof cards before. So very, very cool to see that. It looks kind of like, it's so striking how different it looks without the mint on card body, you know, the actual mini rig on there. It just looks so barren to me. So anyway, that is all I've really got. I hope you enjoyed it. Congratulations to Hakes on another very job well done on this November premiere auction. I thought it was a very interesting one with lots of really cool items. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back soon.